This is It's an Inside Job, and I'm your host, Jason Lim. This is the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and science behind growing resilience, nurturing well-being, and leading with intent. Because when it comes down to it, it's all an inside job. There are days when everything feels a bit too much, when your body is on high alert before your mind even catches up. And if that's tough for us as adults, it's almost impossible for a young person who hasn't had anyone explain what's happening inside them. So here's something worth thinking about as we get started. What if the problem isn't the behavior we see, but the nervous system underneath it? Well, today I'm joined by my guest, Louise Rellis. Now, she's the founder and executive director of Anam Rural Youth Association. It's a mobile trauma integrated support service for marginalized, at-risk, and system-disconnected youth and young adults through Alberta. Now, through Anam, she meets young people where they are literally and emotionally, removing access barriers and providing one-on-one trauma-integrated care. Now, Anam's work is grounded in the belief that every young person deserves to recognize their worth and potential, especially those who have been disconnected from traditional systems. So in today's episode, Louise shares some practical ways to spot when someone is overwhelmed and what you can do in the moment to steady things. Why simple physical supports like movement or chewing gum or eating a proper meal matters more than we think. And how to explain the nervous system's concepts in plain language so young people and their caregivers can actually understand what's going on. And then there's the one idea she brings up, something small but quite profound, that I'll save for the end of this episode. It's something I think more of us need to hear. So without further ado, let's slip into the stream and meet Louise Rellis. I'd like to welcome everyone back to It's an Inside Job. Louise Rellis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much for having me.
Could we kick off the episode by you introducing who you are and what you do?
Thank you. Louise Rellis, as you pointed out, I am from Black Falls, Alberta. I'm a trauma integrated practitioner. I'm a community workplace traumatologist, certified applied metapsychology facilitator, and certified polyvagal therapy practitioner. I work with those who haven't had success with traditional mental health services. I founded the nonprofit Anam Rural Youth, will be 5 years next year. It is a mobile mental health support service where I travel to marginalized, at-risk, system-disconnected youth who have refused traditional mental health support but still need mental health support. That practice is I travel to the youth, it's from age 13 to 25, pick them up in my vehicle. Sessions happen in the vehicle. It's utilizing studies that say the best time to talk to teenagers while you're driving. I bring them for something to eat via drive-through. I incorporate the food because of the chewing motion of the jaw helps you self-regulate. So it aids building connection with these hard-to-reach kids while also maintaining casual, informal setting. We're in the car. Again, we're talking without looking at each other. We're side by side. Those conversations are based around the development of the brain, impact of trauma lived experience, and the reasons why behind behavior struggles and emotions. So it's introspective education is kind of getting their story of their lived experience, their narrative of their lived experience, and working from that aspect. I'm not a counselor or therapist, and I make it clear to those that I'm not, and I work outside with same goals and intentions to help our youth, but I work with those who won't see counselors and therapists just because they are a counselor. And in my private practice that I work very, very part-time with a little bit of extra time that I have is Mount Leinster Consulting, where I meet with those adults who haven't had success with traditional services and have the capacity to come into the office. And that is foundationally mainly the applied metapsychology. It's a very structured format to release emotional charges that have been stuck in the body. It's a rapid release of trauma. And I see great success with my clients in the office who I've had some who said they've been 13 years in therapy, and compared to 5 months in sessions with the applied metapsychology has released what they've been battling with. So that's I'm an Irish immigrant, I suppose. I should have led with that at the very start. If my accent is not giving me away that I don't sound Canadian.
Yeah, you definitely don't sound like you're from Alberta.
No, I'm 13 years in Canada now, but yeah, that's I moved. My family emigrated. At the time we moved, we only had 2 kids. We now have 4 daughters, and yeah, so myself and my husband emigrated from Ireland.
And that's what I want to explore with you. And part of that is the applied metapsychology, because there are a number of, disciplines that we can deal with trauma. And it's not always just trauma. It's just sometimes my listeners want to know, how do I deal with mental stress? How do I deal with rumination and anxiety and sometimes depressive thoughts? How do I get myself out of a funk? How do I find traction? And I found in our pre-interview, a lot of what you do is fascinating, and it's a different take on how we can lead ourselves from the inside out. And that's the conversation I want to have with you today, and to learn more about what you do and how you apply it. I guess to kick off, what brought you to this space? I mean, what brought you to sort of trauma integrated therapy per se?
Great question. And I was contemplating that myself before this interview. Like I figured I'm going to be asked the why this. And I think it runs deeper than I originally thought, because there was a point in my previous role. I worked in trauma as a responder, and there was a frustration of these system-disconnected youth, just because they didn't fit into the typical box of what you should fit into for therapy, that they didn't have the parents with the ability to bring them to the offices. And there's parent conflict then. If there's parent conflict at home, they're less likely to follow through as well with these sessions, going to offices. And there was a part of me that was frustrated with that. Like, we know more now about the nervous system than we've ever known in the past. We know more now about mental health than we've ever known in the past. We know the best time to talk to teenagers is while we're driving. So why are we judging them because they won't walk into an office and sit down? We know what happens if they've grown up in trauma, dysregulation, toxic environments. We know where the nervous system is at, especially as an adolescent brain development. Again, why are we judging them by leaving them at home? And that was a repeated frustration of mine. And there was an incident with a call that I was responded to, and a youth from that call came back and specifically asked for me that they were who I was connected to. And I was left frustrated after, because I was reminded that they're not supposed to come back and ask for us. They're supposed to go to the referrals that we give to them. And that frustrated me, because I'm like, we should be applauding that they're actually coming back for support and not doing something that they shouldn't do to regulate. But I think it kind of ran deeper for me and yes, in what I was seeing in my work. But I feel that I've never had it myself as unfortunate as they had. My biggest trauma in my life was not the biggest traumas that I was seeing in the youth that I was working with. And if I felt so bad and hard in my own trauma that I experienced, how bad could it be for these? And the support when they don't have the parents to recognize that you need mental health support. It was a piece of like, if I could give to them something that I never received myself, even though my traumas was never to the extent of their traumas, it's like that. It was a piece of me that I felt I could give because I understood the nervous system. I have a diploma in child psychology that I had before I left Ireland, and it gave me that bit of a background. And my first role when I first moved here was around early childhood brain development, and that gave me more knowledge, and then the more aware of trauma, and I delved into education, upgrading myself and learning as much as I could. And I recognized that I have an approach that's different. And sometimes I blame my ADHD brain, sometimes I blame my stubbornness, because if there is I suppose there's an element of if we don't fit into the box, why is there a box? Why are we giving this sort of structure that people who are dysregulated, who are in crisis, who experience trauma, and they're supposed to meet these check boxes? And if they don't, well, that's on them because they're not coming into the office. So I think it was a combination of how hard I felt I was when, and honestly, my biggest trauma that I felt at the time was my parents' divorce and the rupture and everything that came from it. And my feelings coming out of that, not comparing them to the youth, but just recognizing, holy hell, I can't imagine how they feel with their lived experiences. And if I can help them recognize that they're not the problem, that their reactions and their behaviors are from the turmoil that they're coming from, it's from the chaos that they've lived and the mess that's kind of enstrewed in that chaos, and it's helping them kind of build their resilience from that, recognize that our environments are not indicative of our identity. It's not who we're going to be. It doesn't limit us just because the people in our environment can't see how they've hurt us, can't see the ramifications of their actions and are not taking accountability for their actions, and instead like look at you as the issue and not kind of taking accountability themselves. If I can help these youth, especially at a time in their life that's pivotal, because the brain isn't fully developed until between at least the age of 25 up to 32 in some cases. But the first 5 years of life is the most rapid period of brain development, with adolescence being the second rapid period of brain development. If I can help them at that crucial time understand the impact that the traumas and lived experiences have had on them and their nervous system, recognizing their ability to cope with this, to manage this, to acknowledge this, and develop the resilience that they've created, because they have resilience because they've developed mechanisms to survive unhealthy situations, chaotic, toxic, very dysfunctional, in some cases, very abusive situations. They've developed coping mechanisms. How can I help them see that, recognize that, and grow from that, their own ability in their environment is not indicative of their identity, and recognizing too, you don't grow up you don't wake up with the ability to do something that wasn't modeled for you. The best thing about the brain is retrainable. We can train the brain at any stage of our lives, but it's recognizing there's expectations on these kids to be regulated. There's expectations on these kids to sit in classrooms when they don't have the ability to because of the environments that they're coming from. So if I can help them see that, if I can help them recognize the coping mechanisms that they've developed, but rechannel it into healthier resilience tactics. And I think a lot of, which is a broader answer to the direct question that you asked, but I think it's just all of that mashed together is the why. It's I struggle with, again, traditional settings is a traditional 50-minute therapy setting. A lot of these youth, it takes them that, it can take them nearly that to regulate, to build the ability, like, can I trust you? Are you going to hurt me? Because they haven't had the opportunity to sort of feel safe in that vulnerability. So it's, again, that's why it's driving that. The study's shown is like when you're not face to face with teenagers, they open up more, feeding them as well too. It's like people are more comfortable when they're eating. But as I say to my clients, when I explain the why behind that chewing motion of the jaw to self-regulate, I tell them, I say, I'm tricking you into trusting me. It's for you to feel comfortable, maintain casual and informal. It's, again, looking at that system doesn't work for you. So why are we not changing our systems? And a lot of that is what I do in recognizing that broader scope when it comes to victims of trauma, survivors of trauma. And trauma is, it's not big T, small t. It's when I look at trauma, and I explain to my clients in both Anam and in Mount Leinster, it's trauma is anything that leaves an emotional charge stuck in your body. It's not always a case of what happened to you, but it's how you felt from what happened. And a lot of times too, then sometimes it's built over multiple instances over time. Sometimes it can be that one event. But also times too, it's what was your capacity before that event? Because if your capacity has been dysfunctional, if your capacity has been in chaos at home, or whether it's a toxic environment, your ability to manage sort of higher emotional events as you're older is not sort of fully available to you. So it's also an element of helping these youths recognize their ability might be limited because of experiences, but it's not impossible to mend those fractures and build them better. And I think that's as I said, a broader answer to your direct
But
question. I could probably keep going.
it's a simple question, but there's a complex answer to that simplicity. If we just kind of circle back, as you said, the critical junction is in that brain development when they're teenagers, when something happens to them that they don't blame themselves, but you give them the vernacular, the terminology, the knowledge to try to create mental hooks. Because as you said, it's the brain, it's the body doing its thing under survival mode based on evolutionary wetware, our programming, that allows us to create this. It helps us to create some sort of buffer. But in modern times, contemporary times, that can be more dysfunctional than functional. And for children and teenagers and young adults to understand that I'm not broken, this is just my body creating a defense mechanism per se, coping mechanisms to allow me to deal with the situation. But sometimes that gets stuck. But I think also many adults don't have the vernacular or the terminology to put words onto what they are feeling. They don't know. They don't have the knowledge or the education or the experience to understand how to cathartically move through things. And I think what you have to say is very, very important, not just to young adults, but I think for the general population. So perhaps could we do a little bit of a short masterclass on sort of the nervous system, dysregulation? And I like the way you said it's the emotional charge stuck in the body that an experience, we can call it trauma or we can call it a negative experience, whatever, but that experience can shape our body and our nervous system. Could you do a little sort of short masterclass to educate myself and our listeners on how that shows up?
So a teenager, 14, 15 years of age, a lot of trouble in school, a lot of behavioral disruption, a lot of speaking back to the teacher, a lot of outbursts in the classroom, for growing, extenuating in behavioral, negative behavior. This youth, approximately maybe 3 years prior, Children's Services was involved in the family because dad was physical with the kids. And it got to the point where it was reported to police and Children's Services was involved. So dad went and took anger management. Received anger management. If I'm not tripping over my words. He did the classes that he was required to do. So what ultimately ended up happening, as I worked with this youth, because this was like the 3 or 4 years later when they referred to me, dad was still aggressive at home. He wasn't physical because he knew I can't be physical anymore because they're older now. They're answering me back and they're calling the cops on me. So I don't get away with being physical, but I'm going to give them the impression that I'm going to hit them. I'm going to come up in their face and I'm going to use my hand. I'm not going to actually hit them, but I'm going to give the impression that I'm going to hit them. And this youth doesn't have can't stand up for themselves, like can't respond to dad in a sense that where they feel safe. They're afraid that they're going to be hit even though dad isn't. He's very volatile, very kind of verbally aggressive at home. So the youth is going from home to school. So they're escalated at home. They're in flight mode, and they have taken off and sort of police have brought them back a few times, but nothing really can be done because dad isn't actually physical. But they're going to school, and in school, you're supposed to sit in the classroom. You're supposed to sit for some, depending on the classes, it's an hour. For some, it's a bit less, some is a bit more. But this youth is coming in with a dysregulated nervous system. They're up here, they're on high alert because at home, before they leave their bedroom, they're listening to hear dad. They're listening to hear, okay, is dad in the kitchen? Do I need to avoid him? what's his tone of voice, who else is in the kitchen. Like they're reading the rooms of other rooms before they've walked into it. It's almost like that they're walking in eggshells and they don't even realize they're doing this. They're trying to avoid dad if possible. So whether they're trying to, whatever their coping mechanism is in regards of getting out of the house with as little interaction with dad as possible, but they're wired for fight flight. And then they go to a classroom and they're supposed to sit there and they're supposed to be regulated and they're supposed to listen to the teacher and they're supposed to follow instructions when their nervous system is just bouncing off the ceiling. So their disruption in behavior is because their home life is so toxic and so dysfunctional that they're in survival mode, that they're trying to avoid. They're listening for dad. They're before they come into the room. They're avoiding if he comes home. They're trying to leave. They're trying to be out of the house as much as possible so that when they only go home, they're going home and going to bed, that avoidance tactic too. So this youth was struggling in school with suspensions, in-school suspensions. They knew the limits in the sense of what they could do because they definitely didn't want an at-home suspension. The in-school suspensions, they're in the office. They're still avoiding home. So working with this youth was trying to help them even understand that their behaviors in school, where the root causes was coming from, the elevation in their nervous system, that they physically did not have the ability to sit in a classroom for one full class. That is all, and especially coming from, because they were in junior high here, and it's where you, at the end of each class, you leave and go to the next classroom. So the ability, they didn't have the ability to regulate, to focus on that class for when the bell would ring at the end of class, to pick up what they were doing, have the ability to sit down in another subject 5 minutes later, completely sort of forget about what they're working on, start working on this new subject with this new teacher who has a different teaching tactic, who has a different approach when it comes to teaching, different presentation, trying to adapt to all of this when their nervous system is in chaos. So it's helping them recognize that the root causes, their struggles, where their struggles is in the classroom, where their struggles is in life right now, their avoidance tactics of a home, where it's coming from, and then trying to help them advocate for themselves in the school system. School counsellor was connected, but not knowing the true extent of what was happening. So trying to help the client. It's not that you have to tell everybody your life experience, but encouraging them to advocate for themselves as much as they were possible in conversations with the school administration, so that accommodations could be made, that they maybe arrive to class 5 minutes after class starts, so they're not coming in with the hustle and bustle and everything kind of going on when they're already sort of dysregulated and heightened, that they can come in where it's kind of calmer and where they have the opportunity that maybe it is if they sit for 15, 20 minutes and then they go out, do a lap of the hallway, come back in for 15, 20 minutes, that their body needs motion, that maybe they get to stand at the back of the class, or maybe they get a fidget chair or something like that. And then maybe they get to leave like 5 minutes before the end of the class. What other tactics, what other skills and tools can we help them develop to help them lower that sort of reactive response from their nervous system? And then also trying to help them develop the ability to communicate to dad. As much as we can't control other people, we can control ourselves. And it's very hard when you're a 14, 15-year-old and dad is a big grown ass man and being sort of very sort of aggressive with you. But it's how can we help them in those situations in the communication back to dad? In a sense, like to very quickly summarize, a sense of like, is this how you really want to speak to me? Like, is this how you want to speak to your daughter? Or this is like, I'm 14. Is this okay for you to speak to me like this? And there was a lot more conversations than that, because again, dad is aggressive. We don't want to antagonize him. We don't want to risk sort of blowing things up. So there was a lot of conversations around use the information that we have, when is opportunities to have those conversations. Like there was opportunities with dad where he was calm and he was remorseful and he was apologetic. Like there was times where he would come back and apologize, not all the time, but it's like, how can we use those opportunities to our advantage so that he's walking away with more accountability. He's walking away recognizing the impact, because prior it would just be, it's okay, it's all right, Dad. No, you're okay. It wasn't, like she would brush away the incident, like when he would try to apologize. So it's trying to help her recognize the resilience within herself, and help giving her the ability to have those conversations when the opportunity was there with Dad, so he could take accountability.
And when the nervous system is dysregulated, as you're talking about, Louise, that means the sympathetic, the fight flight, is in hyperactive mode, and the parasympathetic or the rest digest is not able to tap the brakes. So it's an overdrive. And what you were talking about, the capacity or the bandwidth cognitively and emotionally to deal with, a classroom where you have to sit down and listen and cooperate and collaborate and communicate. Sometimes that's not possible, as you were saying, especially if they've come right from a chaotic environment. And a lot of the adaptive techniques you've talked about, the fidget chair, going for a 10, 15-minute walk, showing up 5 minutes later after the hustle and bustle settled down. These are all adaptive ways to try to help people regulate the nervous system so they can maybe even slightly increase the capacity. I think any of us can relate to that at the end of a crazy day. We've been busy work, the crazy commute home, whatever traffic, that we don't have the capacity to have drawn out deep conversations sometimes. We're just not there. We're just running on fumes. But imagine someone that's their home life, day in, day out, and they're completely hyper vigilant to Dad's voice or where's Dad in the room or whoever who is the cause of this. So I'd like to shift. It's a segue, at least, based on you talk about polyvagal theory, which sits underneath or it layers pretty much a lot of what you do. I was wondering, could you explain it in plain English for our listeners who don't understand or who may not even come across that terms of what polyvagal theory is? And can you share an example of how understanding the nervous system changes the way you respond to moments in crisis? I know you did that just a little bit with your example, but I was wondering if we could expand on that.
Yeah, it's the polyvagal theory. I think it's recognizing that the nervous system sort of runs the show. It's an element of and piece of that, and I include that in conversations with the clients. I even had one client actually, literally 2 weeks ago, say to me, they're a survivor of human trafficking. They're a young adult, and they explained how they never knew, never heard about the nervous system until before they met me. And these are one who have a history of negative experiences with support services, and the only reason why they would receive mental health was because of my approach. I was driving to them. I was picking them up. They didn't have to walk into an office because they did not feel safe in that setting. But it's that nervous system drives the show, and a sense of, I suppose, more and more studies are showing like up to potentially 95% of our day we're running on a subconscious level. So it's that nervous system messaging that's sent to our brain stems. This kind of relates out to our body in a sense. So it's helping them understand that aspect of our day to day and bringing them more in tune to that, recognizing, kind of giving them the awareness to almost like not question themselves. I suppose it's kind of wrong way in explaining it, but the quickest way in explaining it now is like evaluating, why am I feeling this? Why am I reacting like this? Why is this triggered in me? And not to say to always do that, but it is recognizing that our earlier childhood experiences, sets the foundation for our ability, and that foundation for our ability for coping, regulation, resilience, and all that is set in the nervous system. So if we're not happy with how we respond to something, it's kind of recognizing, well, I wasn't maybe modeled the best way, and I responded the way I was taught. So it's like, this is something that I want to retrain. This is something that I don't want to keep continuing to grow with, and I want to repair before I pass it down to my kids. So it is recognizing that the nervous system with the polyvagal is kind of what's coming from the top down, what's coming from the bottom up, how the body responds and that messaging. And as easy layman terms when it comes to my clients. Like as I say to them when I meet, like I'm not a counselor or therapist, it's that traumatologist approach with that polyvagal, the applied metapsychology. But I also say to them too, I'm not a professor. So these are not hard to understand conversations. And I think that's also the other piece that really resonates with them too, because they can understand the language. It's understanding it's like if you get into parasympathetic and the amygdala and all of those technical terms, they're gone. You've lost them. But I can break it into those easy language terms for them. And in each of the conversations that I have with them, it's like planting the seeds. I won't say every single time I'm talking with them, we're talking about the nervous system. But a lot of times it is that understanding piece is planting the seeds with these so that in between sessions, they're thinking about this themselves. They're thinking about their reaction. They're thinking about their triggers. They're thinking about, well, why did that trigger me? What was the behind that too? And then recognizing that it's with those seeds is what we grow. We grow the resilience. We grow the regulation. We grow the ability for them to see those skills that they adapted for survival and how we can turn them into resilience for moving forward. And they're recognizing that the nervous system, it's the messaging that we get from the nervous system is what tells us, kind of runs our day to day in a sense. And are we happy with that? And if we're not happy with that, how can we look at that and how can we retrain that? And it is that recognizing that, as I said when you first asked, it's like it runs the show. The nervous system sort of runs the show, and understanding what that show is, understanding how it presents in us, how it exhibits in us. Are we happy with it? Is it a repeated behavior from what we were exposed to? And how can we change that? How can we rewire that nervous system? And a lot of it is understanding the shutdown, understanding that the nervous system reaches a point where it can't, I suppose not to say that it can't continue, but a shutdown in a sense of when it's reached its capacity for the ability that it has. So it's recognizing what that capacity is, what level where that shutdown kind of comes from, and how can we go back to that inner child? How can we go back to looking at where the chaos and maybe the dysfunction was experienced, and how we can repair that looking backwards. It's understanding we can't change the past. There's nothing we can do about the past, but we can definitely learn from it. We can use it as stepping stools, as platforms to pivot off from moving forward to set ourselves up for success. And it's one of the things I say to most of my clients, whether it's on the road at Anam or whether it's in the office, is one of the best things about life. It's a never-ending opportunity to be the best version of ourselves. We never have to get it perfect now. We never have to know everything now. But once we're on the path to understand and just continue, do better, be the best version of ourselves. Am I happy with who I am? And the rewiring the nervous system as we are doing that. It's recognizing we can't go back, but we can definitely have a different future when we know what to rewire and what to work on.
Yeah, because earlier, to circle back, you were saying, to chew on gum or what have you. It's that chewing motion that sort of starts the metabolism, which is part of the rest digest part that can calm things down. So you employ very simple but profound techniques that can actually influence the nervous system, such as chewing. And I guess there's breathing techniques that many of us hear about and such. Are there other skills that you teach these kids, these young adults, that they can take control, that they can take some level of agency back to help themselves?
Yeah, again, because a lot of these youth, regulation hasn't been modeled for them. Their parents are struggling, and it's not to blame the parents. I believe that the parents are doing the best that they can with the system that they have, with the capacity that they have, but regulation and that hasn't been modeled for them either, maybe healthy relationships. So for youth, I give a few different exercises, different ideas for them, depending on where they are. So if they're at school, I do always encourage them to have the conversation with administration as much as they're comfortable in having. But jumping jacks and wall push-ups are things you can do on the spot. So if they're able to go to the washroom, or if they're able to go out to the hallway as part of that, if they have that conversation with the school to where, hey, I might need to leave after 15, 20 minutes. And if they do leave, they're going for that walk, or they're doing 20 jumping jacks or 20 wall push-ups. Get the body moving, get that circulation going again, sort of work out the dysregulation that's coming up. Gum, again, chewing gum in my car. I bring them for, like, get them food via drive-through, but always in the glove box in my car, I have packets of gum. And I say to all of my clients, it's always there. It's always in the glove box. Help yourself at any session, and take the gum that you want. I have a great partnership with our local food bank, the Black Falls Beyond Food Community Hub here in Black Falls. Any gum they get, they give it to me. I also have a partnership with them. Actually, they help me go in and get food boxes. If some of my clients don't have much food at home, I can bring food boxes to them. But even in my private practice, before sessions with my clients, I have a mini crock pot on my counter outside the office that I put in soup, chili, or stir fry, and I plug it in, and I have snacks in my office all the time. And at the end of sessions, and with the applied metapsychology sessions that I facilitate in office, they're about an hour and a half to 2 hours. They're an hour and a half session, but I always block 2 hours with my client, because if they're not ready to wrap up in an hour and a half, I don't want to box that and say, hey, come back for the next session. We sort of wind down. I gauge what they need on the day. But after session, I'm giving them a hot meal. I'm giving them, as along with the education of, when you're talking about hard things, it's depressing. It's draining on the whole body. And that often is what prevents us from going back and wanting to talk about hard things, because it feels so heavy afterwards. And depending on their story, depending on their lived experiences, for some, they might not feel heavy. For others, they could for a few hours, a day or two, and some maybe for a couple of days. So the education piece too of feed your body when you're in that depressive state helps you sort of not sink into it for more, but also that regulation piece. We're feeding our body and letting ourselves know we're safe. We're vulnerable, but we're safe. We've been holding on to something that we need to release from our nervous system, and we're safe here in doing that. And that food gives that. Yes, it's that chewing motion of the jaw, but it's also that the feeding, nourishing is more of a holistic approach, I suppose, to mental health. It's not just talking about hard things. It's recognizing the impact that talking is doing on our body, and it's nourishing it when we're there too. So encouraging the chewing of gum in between sessions, encouraging snacks. The hand motion helps. Crunchy. So whether it's chips or apples, cutting up apples into small bite-sized pieces, and the hand motion to the mouth. Another tool is a dive reflex. So if you're at home, or for my clients who are maybe in an office and have the opportunity, a bowl, basin, sink, bucket of cold water, hold your breath and stick your face in the water for as long as you can. Take a deep, lift up your head, take a deep breath, and put your face back in the water again for as long as you can. And that helps reset the nervous system too. So it is giving them different tools depending on the environment that they're in. Another tool, another exercise that my applied mental psychology supervisor actually gave me was ear to shoulder, and just looking at your eyes up to the ceiling for 1 minute on one side, and kind of doing the same for 1 minute on the other side, and checking in on your body, feeling how your body is feeling. And for some, if you're in school, you can do it and look up, and you can put your hand like that, so it looks like you're thinking, because kids don't want to be different.
No.
So if they're here and they're looking up at their hand, like it looks like they're thinking about something, but it's with intention. And then they move to the other side, and they can, because you can just move your eyes up to the ceiling, and your head is straight in front, but it can look sort of intentional without giving away that I'm dysregulated right now, I'm about to lose my shit, I need to calm down, I need to calm my system. Sure. I do have steps that I send to my clients, because there's also, and especially I usually take screenshots and text it, and I recommend to my clients to have a folder in their phone to add these kind of suggestions to, because when you're regulated in a session, you can remember it. But when you're dysregulated a week later, you're like, what the did Louise say again? Like, what was that technique? So it is, have it in an album in your phone. I know there's schools now where phones not allowed. So again, that conversation with administration, that kind of heads up. It's like, I'm definitely not encouraging kids to have phones with them in school. I think they can have them in their locker, but I definitely don't think kids should have them in their classroom. That's, I think, another podcast for another day on the effects that has on kids in the classroom. But the recognition of, if it is that this is some tools for them, that maybe they have the ability of having that in a place, even in the office, that maybe another conversation I actually should have with the schools, that maybe they have some pictures of these in the bathrooms and maybe in some of the hallways, so that when kids are dysregulated, that they can see it and they're reminded of it. So I thank you for asking me that question, because it's given me that idea to contact a school to say, hey, can you plaster these exercises throughout? Because I didn't think of that before, but I have been saying to clients, like, make that folder in your phone somewhere that's easy accessible, that you know exactly where to go to, that you're not trying to fummage through messages and kind of scrolling backwards. So yeah, it is recognizing that when we're dysregulated, it is what works. And I know it's easier said than done, because especially when we're developing these skills that haven't been there before, like, it takes a while for the nervous system and our brain to get comfortable with it, because our brain always wants to be comfortable, and our brain is comfortable with what it knows best, and what it knows best is what it does more often. So if it's not used to doing these tools and techniques, it's kind of going to fight against it in a bit. So also encouraging them to kind of practice when they're starting to feel sort of dysregulated. If something's happening at home, or if they're feeling sort of off, try a couple of the different techniques at different times to see what lands with you, because there's always suggestions. There's always people saying, oh, this really worked for me, and this is awesome, you should do this. But it's what lands for you. And I think the breathing tactic too, there's different breathing exercises, and that I kind of laugh sometimes. I have lots of my friends who have recommended multiple times that I should do yoga. And I've tried yoga 3 times, and my brain will not shut up long enough for me to enjoy yoga. I just want to get out of there. Again, I could kind of my ADHD brain. But I do remember, like, that box breathing of the breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and wait for 4 before you breathe again. That was something that came up years ago in the training, that in the trauma, my first role in trauma and training kind of came up, and it always annoyed me. Like, it was almost like that to me was like nails on a blackboard, right? That's just my nervous system's reaction. But I was listening to a podcast years ago with Brene Brown, and she was saying how she was working with the Navy SEALs, and they started talking about this tactical breathing, and it was the very same steps. It was the very same box steps, and it was just the different language, tactical. And I know my brain grasps that quicker. So when I tell myself tactical, there's a different response in my body, and I can feel the different response. So I use that too with the clients too. It's recognizing that sometimes the technique might work, but the language we're using for it might not. And it's recognizing, I think, that's educating ourselves, what we need, what lands with us, what works for my system.
I think it's also important to understand that, for many of us, when the nervous system is dysregulated, it doesn't mean just because you breathe a technique for 10 minutes that you're completely regulated again. It can take hours for it to slowly step down, right? It's not a light switch, it's more like a dimmer switch. And so it's understanding that there are different techniques, but it doesn't just happen at a snap of the fingers. It takes time for the system, and it can take literally hours for some people, right? I know it does for me. When I get dysregulated, it takes time for my nervous system to calm down. It can take hours for me particularly, right? And I agree with you. We need to find what lands with us, what works for us, because not all techniques. And that's why I think what's really interesting to hear, Louise, what you suggest is a number of techniques, right? Whether it's chewing gum, whether it's going for a ride, whether it's eating, whether it's putting your face in a cold water, whether it's talking things through, right? There's a number of techniques. I mean, what has working closely with these at-risk youths, per se, taught you about resilience that most of us never see? And there's a second part of that question. I'm wondering what keeps you grounded enough to work through this sustainably so you don't tip over the edge.
Great question. I think that ebbs and flows. Sometimes I feel I'm near my edge, and other times I'm like, oh, that was, I'm back to normal again. And I think it ebbs and flows in a sense. Like I am lucky that I have an amazing husband, an amazing family. Like my girls are so supportive, and my husband is so supportive. And my dad, even though he's in Ireland, he still
Mm.
grounds me. Um, I think I recognize my brain is busy and my day to day is busy. And I suppose my kids play ringette. And they all four of them play ringette. So that in a sense is my grounding. Like they're as busy as we are with their ringette games and practices, it's like a family. Like we've built a sort of a family with these families of ringette. We've been with for years. I think this is our ninth year of our kids playing ringette. So we've like known these people, grown up with their kids, sort of in a sense. So every Tuesday and Thursday evening is practice. So I don't work Tuesdays and Thursday evenings, and I get to decompress with my ringette family. Weekends are always ringette games. I don't work weekends in extenuating circumstances. If a youth is, something is kind of shit hit the fan somewhere, and then they reach out to me, I meet with them. So that helps me kind of with my schedule. I recognize ringette is from September to April. And for anybody who doesn't know what ringette is, it's similar to on ice hockey, except it's with a ring, not a hockey puck, and the stick is straight. It doesn't have the curve on the end. Because I know my family in Ireland were like, what the hell is ringette? And we had to send YouTube clips. Same with people here in Canada. When we say about we were hurling is one of our sports back home, they've no idea what hurling is. And we have to send them YouTube clips. But ringette is from September to March. So I recognize April, I suppose April to June is softball. I have girls in that
Mm.
play softball and soccer. So my kids' sports keeps me kind of grounded because I recognize like I do overextend myself with my schedule. I do when youth reach out, I do my best to kind of put them in and sort of maybe meet when I'm not supposed to be working or whatever. But it's very limited. It doesn't happen very often. Like the youth that do reach out in between our scheduled sessions is when something has gone south. And I say that to the kids. I say that like just because we've booked to meet maybe December 4th doesn't mean we have to wait till December 4th to meet. If
Mm.
something happens, if shit hits the fan in between, shoot me a message and say, hey, can we meet sooner? Something happened. I'm like, I can't guarantee what I'll have, but I definitely like, and I often have where maybe something pops up and a client has to reschedule or whatever. So things often pop up. But I suppose I met it back to the clients again, but back about me. And yeah, I think it's a work in progress in recognizing my own tools, recognizing when I am busy and recognizing when it's a busy season of my life, especially when there's tournaments and sometimes there's quite a bit happening in a short space of time. Well, I know I need to reduce my hours. I know I need to maybe have a few more hours in office, and maybe not offer as many dates and times to clients because usually I will give options to meet and they pick what works for them. So I've learned not to give as many options because I need to be the best version of myself if I'm going to continue being able to help them.
Yes.
So it's continuously kind of checking on myself and recognizing is this like stress from the story that I've heard, or is this kind of stress from I've been overextending myself and really sort of paying attention to that and I've integrated more podcast listening myself
Mm.
too and more reading and I'm always upgrading, I'm always taking a course, I'm always learning something new, but I'm also very actively trying to commit to the book club that I'm a part of too. So I have to read that book and I have to attend book club. I don't make it every single month, but I definitely don't make the excuses that I used to in the past. I might have attended once or twice a year in the past, but now it's like, no, I need to, like when I schedule something for myself, I need to commit to myself as well.
Yeah, so you're quite aware when you need to sort of turn down the intensity so you can recharge, so you can be there for other people, but you need to sort of charge yourself before you can help charge others, per se.
Yeah.
We are coming close to the top of the hour, Louise. What message would you like to leave with our listeners, whether it's a skill, a thought to carry around with them?
I think for our listeners, depending on the audience of their role, if they're in systems, looking at how they can change the system. I think one of my biggest frustrations is that expectation that people are supposed to fit the box for the system. But if the system was built right to match what people need, was human focused, there wouldn't be a box. I think for years, what I've heard, even like years ago when I first moved to Canada, I knew after about being here 2 years, I knew I needed to meet more people. I needed to get out. I was very much like, I suppose, still adapting to a new way of living, a new culture. But I volunteered. I started volunteering quite a bit because I knew the best way to be involved, to get to know people was to volunteer. And I very much wanted, like, we chose Black Falls to live. So I wanted to be involved in my community. But one of the things in lots of different roles that I was involved in that was a repeated frustration is we're not getting the families we need to get. We're not getting the parents that we need to get. We're not getting the kids that we need to get. Too many systems, too many programs. I suppose, even though they say they're trauma informed, it's based around ticking a box. This meets this and this meets that because it's an easy audience. It's not putting the extra work in to grasp the audience that need it most, to grasp those who are unseen, and often those who are not represented in statistics and studies and that too. So I think if as a system, somebody's working in a system, does your system meet the ability to adapt to what these youth, these high-risk system-disconnected youth and their parents, like there's lots more I would love to do with Anam in recognizing, like, I know I'm bringing the youth back to the environment as the catalyst of their behavior, but I know I'm doing something that was never done before, so at least I'm capturing these kids now, and my hope is to evolve that further. But if you are a system disconnected youth, or if you are a parent who didn't come from the safest environment, that maybe there was trauma in your background, it is, give yourself the grace to recognize you're doing the best you can with what you've been given in life. There's too much judgment, I feel, and I think that's why I really sort of trauma integrated is my belief, is my work system, is the passion that everything comes from. I already know where your nervous system is at once I even have the smallest piece of your background. And if I could just help more people relinquish the judgment and the shame and the guilt that they're holding onto, that's preventing them from getting the help that they need. It's like, just which is hard because finding the right person is hard. It's difficult to tell your story and it not be the right fit, and have to tell your story again and not be the right fit. It's re-traumatizing in some environments, but you're worth it. You don't have to fight to find your worth. You're worth it. It's starting here and now, and sort of just recognizing it's like just one step. 1% a day. If we can improve ourselves by 1% a day, that's huge. In a year, that's 365%. If I'm, yeah,
Something like that. Yeah,
I question, yeah, true. So it's that 1%. Sometimes we, now I just totally, when I went wrong there with the wrong numbers, it was like, but
no, but I mean, small improvements, even 1% is a significant improvement. You know, every day is a reset. And if we can see that, for me, like, I play golf sometimes, I don't see it as 18, like one game. I see it as 18 games, right? So I have a chance to reset every hole. And I think sometimes it's the same thing. If we can see each day as, okay, I go to bed, get up, new chance, new me, new start. Let's see what the day brings. And it's not always easy to get into that mindset, but slowly, as you said, over time, what we think consistently becomes who we are, per se. I know, Louise, you give a lot of speeches and you run workshops on this type of thing. I was wondering, if someone wanted to reach out to you, do you do these online or is it more live events?
Both. I can do both. I do prefer live personally, and that's just a personal choice. But because I do think that relational piece in some of the conversations. But yeah, online works too. I definitely can provide them online because I do recognize that. Even though, like with on Rural Youth, I cover in Central Alberta. My office is based in Blackfalls, but I cover from Camrose to Carstairs, Rocky Mountain House to Forestburg. So that's the area. So I have clients within 43 communities in that area. So within that area, I can travel to any of those communities to present. So I do recognize outside of that is probably more uh, restrictions or difficulties in a sense. So I can provide online, but yeah, I suppose Calgary and Edmonton I can travel to too. But yeah, in line and on person works.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Louise. I found it a fascinating conversation, and it really resonates with me with your trauma integrated approach by creating a bespoke or a more tailored therapy per se, depending upon the child's or the young adult's needs, and you tailor to fit that. As you said quite eloquently, not everything lands with us, and we have to sometimes little trial and error to see what really works for ourselves, as it is when working with youth or young adults.
For sure, definitely. Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day. I hope the evening isn't too dark, and talk again.
The idea held back at the start of this episode is that resilience doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from being met by someone who can hold steady when your own system can't. That thread ran through everything Louise shared today. When she meets a young person in her car, gives them something to eat, or lets them move while talking, she's teaching them, without saying it, that their nervous system makes sense. Their reactions aren't random. They've been shaped by what they've lived through, what they've experienced. And once someone understands that, the whole conversation changes. Behavior becomes information, not a flaw. Louise reminded us that when a kid can't sit still in a classroom, it isn't defiance. It's the body doing its best with the tools it has. And sometimes the most effective intervention is incredibly simple. It might be to arrive 10 minutes later when the hallway chaos is settled. Maybe it's to take a movement break because sitting still isn't an option. Or perhaps it's having someone explain polyvagal basics in words that actually mean something. Louise showed how regulation often starts with small physical things: chewing gum, a bit of food, an exercise that drops the heart rate, a moment to catch your breath. These aren't tricks. They're ways of giving the nervous system a foothold. And maybe that's the real takeaway for the rest of us. You don't have to be a clinician to offer something helpful. You can be the person who slows down a conversation, who keeps your voice steady, or who notices when someone is overwhelmed before they even realize it themselves. That small shift, your calm meeting their chaos, well, it can change the way their brain writes the moment. Louise, thank you for the generosity of your work and for bringing us so much honesty into the conversation. What you're doing with these young people is a reminder of what's possible when we meet human beings as human beings, not as problems to solve. So if something in this episode stayed with you, dear listener, share it. Someone in your world might need exactly this kind of perspective. And if you haven't already, well, subscribe or follow the show so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, keep well, keep strong, and we'll speak soon.